towards building a temple or any religious cause, because the fruits of that, your soul is going to get a lot more, but simultaneously you are helping people at a more real level. So, I mean, we may have good health, we may have a lot of money, but we are still a charity case, because from within we are still unhappy and from within we are still empty. And just as you feel sorry for someone who's dying of a deadly disease, you should feel equally sorry for someone who has anger within them, because that person is suffering as well, and in fact that anger is not only going to lead to current suffering, but you create so much power for yourself that it's leading to suffering for many lives to come. So in fact, true charity and purposeful charity is donating to a cause that educates people about the truth and about where true happiness lies. And that's why donating to religious causes is so impactful and purposeful. Just like Mehul Bhai, I'm sure he spent money for this room and organizing this event and the food, but I'm guessing that hopefully you guys got something out of this talk which is way more than any material object that you could have received. And not only is this learning going to impact your current life, but it's going to impact your endless and many lives to come and your long-term future, which is not limited to just this life.
Not me, there are a group of other friends that
Okay, so it's a group of people. I wasn't on myself.
Yeah, so I have a question for you.
Can you please stand up?
Yeah, hi. My name is Avni, and I just have one question. That as human beings, we are taught to relate with other human beings, father, mother, brother, sister. These are the relationships that we know the animal world doesn't know. So do you think that if you give it all up, no relationship when you become a sadhvi or whatever, sadhvi, right?
Yeah.
So how can you live without any relationships?
I think it's not that. So currently in the family setting, our relationships are very limited. Our care and concern is very limited to just the souls we call our father and mother, and or our brother or our children. But in fact, when you take Diksha, you are building a relationship with every soul that is alive. And there's a saying in Sanskrit called Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which means that after one takes Diksha, the entire world is his or her family. So right now, our care and concern is so limited and concentrated only to a very small group of people. And because of that attachment to a small group, often we have negative feelings to people outside this small circle. We then develop feelings of selfishness where we only care for those who we consider to be ours, and even at the cost of maybe someone else's pain and suffering, we are willing to make our people happy. Whereas when you take Diksha, you are defining your family as not just for souls, but the entire all living beings. And all human beings are your family. And you will treat each and every person as if they are your own. So in fact, your definition of relationship only broadens drastically.
Hello, my name is Bhavik, and I have a question regarding the importance of materialism in temples. So I've witnessed how a lot of temples, they put a lot of importance on how fancy or $1 million murtis that they have, instead of placing an importance on the philosophies and educating the younger people about Jainism. So how can we go back and try to reduce the materialism that we see in temples and try to promote more education and promote more of the philosophies that we all believe in?
I think both is important, because as long as you're attached to the material world, in order to overcome your attachment to the material world, this attention and affection towards beauty, you transform that towards Bhagwan. Like instead of decorating your own body, which is perishable, you will decorate the idol of Bhagwan. So you're displacing the rag or the attachment you have towards a higher being who you aspire to become like, and that is one step towards you overcoming material objects totally. See, we can't, like my brother said, we can't go from 0 to 100 overnight, but we can go from 0 to 50 and then 50 to 100. So you will notice someone who takes Diksha, they don't do puja, they don't build temples, they don't decorate the idols of Bhagwan. But someone who is still in sansar, someone who still hasn't renounced the worldly life, they do build temples and they do decorate idols of Bhagwan because they still haven't completely given up their love for the material world and their love for beauty. So instead they are transforming that love for beauty from their own bodies and own meaningless material possessions to Bhagwan, which will help them connect to ultimately Bhagwan's virtues. The whole point of decorating Bhagwan's idol or decorating a temple or building a really beautiful temple is that eventually it is a medium for you to connect with Bhagwan's virtues. And ultimately, the whole purpose of any religious ritual or any religious activity is to develop those virtues within yourself. Basically, to get rid of negativity and negative emotions and to be attracted more towards positivity and positive emotions, which is what resides in Bhagwan. Like emotions of forgiveness and compassion and humility and generosity. These are the virtues of Bhagwan. So whilst decorating Bhagwan, because we still haven't yet overcome our love for beauty and love for material objects, whilst so we're transforming, we are converting our love towards, for material objects, we are directing it towards Bhagwan instead, and in that process we hope to connect with the virtues of Bhagwan. So it is important to make the most beautiful temple. It is important to have the most beautiful idol of Bhagwan. It is important to decorate in the most beautiful way you can. Because by doing that, you will disconnect yourself from the material world and connect yourself more with Bhagwan and the virtues of Bhagwan. And secondly, the fact that people are not investing in towards educating the youth, I won't completely blame the committee or the temple committee because I think the youth are not interested enough and they are not getting the support from the youth that they need in order to educate them. So I think if the youth show more interest, I'm pretty sure that the older generation will go out of their way, as Mehul Bhai and his friends have done today, in order to ensure that the youth are educated and connected with Jain philosophy. So I think it is our responsibility as youth to show that interest. And I'm sure they definitely will go out of their way to ensure that we are getting that education and understanding.
Hi, I'm Ashna. I have a question regarding Jainism and gender equality. Something that I've been thinking about for a while is I think that sometimes, we know that our bodies, or if we are these souls and we're not these bodies, I think that some of the questions that I come up with is how can there be such a disparity between Jain women and Jain men? And I just wanted to know that because you've committed to so much dedication for Jainism, do you also believe the same, or do you feel that it's not the case? And if you do believe that there is a disparity, how have you come to terms with it and sort of accepted the disparity between them?
I don't think Jainism says there's a disparity in the sense that Jain religion believes that both men and women can attain moksha, and souls that reside in both male bodies and female bodies both attain moksha. So in that case, there's no disparity. I'm guessing, I'm not exactly sure what disparity you're referring to. So maybe if you can be a little more clear about that.
So I think that some of the disparity comes from even the higher you get or the more involved you get in Jainism. Sometimes, even in Pratikaman, for example, I think women are not allowed to speak if men are in the room. They're the ones who may not say the mantras, even the men might say it in that way. I think culturally also there is a disparity just in Indian culture. So for a woman to take Diksha, I think it's a really strong and very powerful step to take. And I think that for that to happen, there must have been in your mind, maybe you never believed there was a disparity to begin with, or you understood it and felt that you could reconcile it anyway. And it was something that it was about the soul and not the body. But as we talk about the soul and we talk about the differences between, you know, the soul and the body, then if all souls are equal and gender neutral, then sometimes when we actually try to become closer to Jainism and understand more about it, I feel there are some obstacles or some barriers for women to reach closer and sort of get that same equality.
No, I don't think there's a disparity. I think there's just a lack of understanding why women cannot recite the sutras, or why, even today I'm speaking to a male audience, but actually in truth, a woman is not allowed to speak to a male audience or to give a lecture to a male audience. And even in India, you'll see a sadhiji never gives a lecture to males or to sadhus for that matter. And the reason for that is not because there's a disquality, but it is, one of the reasons is for the protection of the women in itself, that a woman being placed in front of a huge crowd is not something that is very appropriate, I mean, as such, women are objects of lust and desire, and any sort of religious ritual is one in which someone is trying to refrain from such thoughts and such desires. So to put a woman in a public eye, especially in a male audience, is definitely not appropriate in a religious and spiritual setting for this reason. Further, it is the protocol that men always lead. Men are always the ones that give the lectures. Men are the ones that speak the sutras, and the reason for that is not because anyone looks down on a woman. I think honestly I don't have a full understanding, and I don't view that as someone looking down on me just because I can't see a sutra. I don't think it's really that big a deal or that much of an ego issue for me. I understand and respect that there must be a reason behind it. One of the reasons, as I just mentioned, is that a woman being in the public eye is not something appropriate in a religious and spiritual setting where someone is trying to control their negativity and negative thoughts. And women in general being an object of lust and desire and beauty, it is not appropriate for a woman to speak or be, as I said, in a public eye. So that's definitely one of the reasons. I'm sure there's another better or deeper reason which I'm not aware of. But it's not something that deters me or affects me in any way. I completely respect the tradition for what it is. It's not at all an ego issue for me, and definitely I would say from personal experience, never have I felt that I'm looked down on. Even in the case of Indian tradition, it is always for the protection of women that whatever is done is done. It's not because to belittle them or put them down. It is our own ignorance and own ego that makes us feel that, oh, they're behaving, men or traditions are putting women down. But I can assure you it's only for the protection of women that anything is done in a certain way. So I guess.
Hello, my name is Rahul Shah, and I live in Washington, D.C. Your brother convinced me to come today, and I'm very grateful he did.
Thank you for coming.
So in today's society, today's culture, we live such a life of abundance. And when living such a life of abundance, it can become increasingly difficult to live a more Jain way of life in terms of food wastage, material items, other vices. So what advice would you have for a young Jain in this country to kind of filter through that noise and focus on living a Jain way of life?
I think the first thing is to identify your needs versus your ego, and how much of your accumulation is really just to satisfy your egotistical needs rather than true needs. And the sooner we free ourselves from the grip of the ego, honestly, the sooner more happy and more peaceful we will become. So this whole need to impress and need to stand out and need to for attention, I think if we can, liberate ourselves from that through understanding Jain philosophy and through understanding about the soul and karma, I think that in itself will help. We will no longer feel the need for accumulation and abundance. And I think we will be very content and extremely happy in less. I mean, we'll honestly start believing less is more.
think the only other thing I would add is, as she said, it's where you get your source of happiness and meaning from. And for me, for the longest time, it was purely from accumulation of material objects. I won't lie that that's completely not disaffiliated. It's still, part of who I am, part of my personality. But I feel less dependent on that for my happiness. So I think if you begin to identify what you need, I think the first piece is awareness. Being aware of what you need and why you need it. And then really it's a question of your self-determination to make that choice about do I really need it or not. But I realize that to completely get rid of that is a very, very long journey and it takes time. You would be completely blessed if you get rid of it very quickly. But at least be aware of why you are accumulating a certain item versus lack of awareness or ignorance. And then make the effort to really introspect within yourself to say, do I really need this? Okay, maybe I do need it and know for what reason. And have the aspiration at some point that I will go free of this particular piece.
Hi, my name is Ruchi and I moved from India 4 years back. My question to you is how did you get the courage to detach yourself? How did you get the courage to have control on your emotion? For example, if I miss my parents, I can call them and speak to you. But for you, after taking Diksha, how are you going to control them? How do you just get that courage to do
Like before I answer your question, I just want to address the notion of what is detachment. Even before I started understanding Jain philosophy, I thought that detachment means no longer being concerned. But that in fact is extremely incorrect. Detachment actually means detaching from your own ego and your own selfish needs and caring so much about others that you care for the joy of caring and that you have no expectations in return. Usually when we care for someone else, whether it's between a husband and a wife or whether it's between even a mother and a child, usually always have an expectation that they should care for me back. Or I should receive that affection back, and that's what fuels us caring for someone. So I just want to clarify that detachment in fact doesn't mean not caring, but it means caring to the extent where you care for the sake of caring, not because you want anything in return. You don't have any expectations. And that is the kind of love that Bhagwan had in his heart, where he cared for every living being, every soul, and he had no expectations of anything in return. He cared for the sake of caring. So I just want to clarify that notion of detachment is not caring. It in fact means not having selfish expectations. Detaching from your own ego is really what detachment means. So when you say that, how did you have the courage for to be detached from your parents? In fact, I think by me taking Diksha, I'm probably going to care for them more than I ever have, to be honest, because me being on this path, I know it will always be an inspiration for them to always, and my brother, to always think along these lines, to no longer seek for a sense of validation or fulfillment in the material world or in external attention, but instead to constantly focus within themselves and to constantly focus on improving themselves and to constantly worry about their soul and the soul's future. And in fact, I think now I will be able to care for them at the soul level rather than the body level, which I think is true caring. Because they too are not the bodies, they too are the souls, and they too will only find true happiness when they experience or inculcate the virtues of the soul. And me being in their life is actually instead increasing their attachment towards me. And attachment is the source of all pain and suffering. I mean, I remember back in the day, even when I was young, I always maintained that even if I get married, I definitely don't want to have children. Because I could see in my parents' lives that basically my life was their life. They had lost all independent identity, all independent purpose. Every moment of theirs was focused on me, and I felt like there's no way that I'm losing my myself for anyone and losing my own identity for anyone. And even if I get married, I definitely don't want to have children. Like I always had that in the back of my mind. So in fact, me liberating them from their attachment for me is doing them the biggest service, because their attachment for me is the cause of pain for them. And me being on this path, I think they will also start seeing me as a soul rather than their own daughter, and will no longer cling to me for being happy. Instead, they'll start clinging on to their own souls to find that happiness. So I think I can care for them now in a more true and beautiful way than I could.
On a lighter note, what I'm most excited about my sister's Diksha is she actually was the first time who called me Rushabh Bhai. Her, as a female Maharaj Sahib, she has to refer to every male she meets as their name and Bhai. She never called me Rushabh Bhai in my life, so finally it was a Jain Diksha as a result of which she actually would now call me Rushabh Bhai. So I'm happy about that.
Hi, my name is Ruben. Born and brought up in Mumbai. I did masters here and now working for past 2 years. So since you said that you are interested in Jainism more, you started learning more and more. So did you just learn by like associating with, like you used to go to the Jiva group and Sadhu Sadhvis back in India, or did you read any books? If so, which books did you specifically in English?
I think honestly my interest in Jainism didn't come from a group or any books or as per se. I think it started from noticing that I'm not happy doing what I'm doing, and that material objects are not giving me happiness and people are not giving me happiness. And I think the awareness that I am becoming too dependent on other things and words and attention to find fulfillment, I think that's what created my true interest in religion. And I think, no matter how many books you read or people you meet, if from within you don't acknowledge the fact that I'm not happy, I'm not fulfilled, I'm not proud, I'm not getting what I deserve, I'm not feeling what I deserve to feel, I'm just not there yet, I'm not content with the direction in which my life is going. I think that feeling will give you, will let you understand Jain philosophy at a depth that from which it needs to be understood and appreciated. So I can tell you books, and I can name people, and I can name groups, but until you don't feel that I am not happy right now, and I am not fulfilled, and the direction in which my life is going is not giving me the happiness that I deserve, until you don't really feel that, none of this will really help.
Just like, I was not talking about what inspired you, but like after you got the...
You have to have that awareness, and I think then, I don't think I can prescribe you something. For everyone it's a different journey and different experience, and you need to have your own experience. So, like my brother said, The Jailer, it's an excellent book. It's not very technical where you're going to get lost in the terminology. It's just life philosophy, the philosophy of karma, described in a very beautiful way in which it's easy to understand. So that, and it's in English, and he has a PDF which he can email you. So that's a great book to start off with. Secondly, try to surround yourself with positive people. Try to surround yourself with people who are not too much concerned about external success, who don't thrive on external success and material objects and attention, but who look beyond and who try to find meaning and purpose in doing other things, and who are not so controlled by their ego. Try to find people who are looking for some more meaning in their life and some more purpose. I think having such people in your life will definitely make a huge impact on you. Choose the friends you make. Don't just be friends with people who are too controlled by the external world and society. And mean, the best thing, honestly, the thing that brings about true change is finding a guru and having a guru in your life. And I can attest to that honestly, a guru is at the center and at the heart of your spiritual growth and your spiritual progress. And if without a guru, it's just not possible. Just like a child needs a mother to grow, and only a mother can give that affection and nurture. If you want to grow spiritually, you need a guru. Because words and books are not enough. You need that personal touch. You need someone to understand you. You need someone to relate to you. And it is essential to have a guru in your life. I know one person jokingly said that a guru is nothing but your personal shrink, and it's actually true. For me, my guru has been my biggest shrink. And I think God knows we all need that in our life. We all struggle internally with our negativity and emotions and external situations that bring us down. And having a guru in your life is having this amazing shelter over your head where nothing can touch going forward. So I think, you being from India, I'm sure you visit India, make the effort to seek out a guru and the right guru. Not someone who is just in the clothes of a sadhu. Don't get impressed by that. Of course, once again, a guru has to be someone, a true guru according to Jain scriptures is someone who has renounced the world. But do not get easily impressed just by the clothes of a sadhu. Look for someone who's truly on the right path, who has no monetary demands, who has no expectations from you, but only wants you to grow from within, only cares for your soul, and has no selfish needs. You need to ensure that.
Hi, my name is Saad. I have two questions. One is you spoke a lot about separation of soul and body. Most of us here who are from the educated side of it, you're taught to believe things that you can touch and feel. So how did you exactly go towards the awareness and the 100% faith into it? And then second question is, do you believe in destiny and fate, that this was meant to be, or did you decide to believe with it?
So the first question is, how did I so strongly believe in the existence of the soul? I think it's a combination of logic and experience, because what I was taught was true happiness lies in the virtues of the soul. And the more and more virtues I adopted in my life or tried to cultivate, I instantly felt that peace and joy increasing within me. And then I want to talk more about that. And secondly, logically, if we think, today even science acknowledges the existence of soul, existence of some type of energy which gives the body life. So, if you do some research on the internet, I'm sure you'll find articles that support that. But secondly, there's so many things you can think about, like, today someone hits me and I can feel it, but as soon as something leaves my body and the body's deemed to be dead, and you hit that body and the body doesn't feel anything. So there has to be that something in the body that gave it that sense of knowledge and feeling, which is now no longer present. And secondly, how do you explain some people are born poor, some people are born rich? How do you explain that that children of the same mother, they can be twins, but yet they have such different personalities, they have had the same upbringing, the same exposure, but still they have such different personalities? How do you explain the differences, while some people have everything and some people have nothing, not just people but animals? How do you explain all these differences in the universe? So it just proves that there was something before this life. And sometimes criminals go scot-free. Does that mean that they are not going to ever pay for their deeds or their wrongdoing? So it makes you question, is there something after this life where they will definitely pay for what they have done? Even we commit so much violence every day, but yet we don't experience that violence being done on us. So does that mean that we are going to go scot-free? So, you have to raise all these questions, try to do some research on your own. And that is what I did. And initially I didn't just refer to Jain scriptures, I referred to every religion, what they had to say about the soul. And I found that every single religion believes in the existence of the soul. That it is not the, except for so no atheists, yes. Except for atheists, everyone believes in the existence of the soul. And I don't know, it just logically seemed correct. And secondly, as I said, it was from personal experience. The more compassionate I became, the more humble I became, the more detached, means the more less and less I was controlled by my egotistical needs.